After Eli's death, I promised myself I'd linger only a few months, just enough to steady Taryn's world. She was navigating grief, twin toddlers, and a spouse with erratic work hours. I had the time, the strength, and the urge to help. So I settled in. That was 3 years back. Initially, it felt fulfilling to be essential. I rose early, prepared school lunches, and managed endless laundry cycles. My pension filled the gaps their salaries couldn't: groceries, utility bills, preschool fees. I covered them without complaint. That's what kin does, I reasoned. But as months drifted by, gratitude faded, requests turned into demands, and my presence, both physical and emotional, shrank. Taryn stopped inviting me to family dinners. The twins began calling Niall's mother, Clara, their other grandma, though she lived miles away and rarely visited. I'd bring up Eli occasionally, only to face silence, as if he were a forgotten song no one played anymore. Yet I stayed. I cooked dinners, adjusted to their fixed thermostat at 68 degrees, and overlooked the smirks when my detective shows blared too loudly. At 68, I told myself I was fortunate to be near my grandkids, that this was what later years meant: useful if not treasured. Then last Tuesday evening, as I paired the boys' socks, Taryn entered the laundry room, clutching her phone like a barrier. "Mom," she said, avoiding my gaze, "Niall's parents are moving in." I blinked, a sock still in my grip. "Visiting, right?" "No, moving in permanently." "We need the room." I laughed, expecting a grin to follow. None came. "You'll need to move out by month's end," she said. I chuckled again, the words sounding like a cheesy TV script. But her expression stayed firm, arms folded. She was serious. I set the socks in the basket deliberately, as if slowing down could pause reality. Then I walked past her, composed and quiet. In the hallway, I glimpsed our family portrait on the shelf, my frame, my photo. But I was no longer in it. The office door stood ajar, boxes already piled inside. By morning, the shift was palpable. Taryn tapped on my door like I was a temporary lodger. She stepped in, offering a forced smile and holding a marker. "Hey, could you start packing up some non-essentials? We can store them in the office closet for now." Non-essentials. I scanned the room. Everything was mine: the quilt on the bed, the bookshelf, the lamp on the dresser. But I nodded and said, "Sure." That afternoon, she leaned into the kitchen while I chopped vegetables for dinner. "Oh, one thing, Clara's sensitive to strong odors. They bother her breathing. Maybe ease up on the spices and onions for a bit." I stirred the pot slowly. "Of course." That evening, carrying towels to the laundry, I overheard them in the living room. I paused behind the partition, out of sight. "We'll give Clara the master," Taryn was saying. "Dorian can take the downstairs guest room." "And Mom?" Niles asked. A pause, then her voice sharp and casual. "She can go somewhere. Maybe the boys share a room and we turn hers into a play space." Niles said nothing. I slipped back to my room, towels abandoned. My chest tightened like I'd breathed in something jagged. In the days that followed, I saw the house anew. The groceries shifted. No more of my preferred coffee. Fewer fresh fruits, more frozen dinners. The thermostat dropped to a chilly 66 and no one offered a throw. At dinner, the seating rearranged itself. Clara's spot was already set beside the boys, as if her arrival was a done deal. My chair stayed pushed into the table's corner, unused. The twins stopped asking for bedtime tailies. Taryn claimed they'd outgrown them. I began eating alone in my room, tray in lap, watching old videos with the sound muted. I took to wandering the house at night, barefoot and silent. It was the only time it felt like mine. I'd switch on the porch light, check the doors, fold a stray throw. Small habits, like echoes of a life I still lived but was no longer welcomed in. That's when I started cataloging. Not just my possessions, but what I was no longer permitted to touch. Camille stirred her coffee slowly, her eyes narrowing as she watched me across the table at Finch's diner. We met every first Thursday, but this time felt heavier. I'd been quiet since we sat down. "They're not phasing you out," she said, setting her spoon down. "They've already erased you." I let out a faint chuckle, more exhale than sound. "I know," I said, "but hearing it out loud lands differently." At home, I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. I'd never been one to tally love in dollars, but Camille's words stuck like damp air. I sifted through statements month by month. Grocery trips, utility payments, checks written to Taryn for extras. I started a spreadsheet. When I finished, the total neared $26,000. I leaned back, the figure burning in my mind, $26,000 from a fixed income. Silent dollars that propped up their household, unnoticed and unappreciated. I pulled an old folder from a drawer. Inside were documents from years ago when I'd considered buying a small apartment after Eli's passing. I'd had a deposit ready. I was days from closing when Taryn called, sobbing. The twins' childcare costs had spiked. Niles was jobless. I'd sent her the deposit the next day. She'd wept, vowing to repay me. That was nearly 3 years ago. I shut the folder and held it close, its edges worn from use. My hands stayed steady. For now, but something in me stirred. This wasn't about space anymore, not about Clara's sensitivities or room assignments or meal plans. It was about being vital until I became dispensable. Useful until I was inconvenient. I set the folder on the counter and stared at it for a long time. Then I grabbed a pen and scrawled a note on a sticky pad, find the documents, get it in writing, track everything. The words sat there like a vow or a caution. I waited until the boys were outside on their scooters before confronting her. Taryn was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of bland, store-bought soup. I stood just beyond the counter, hands clasped like I needed an appointment. "Where am I supposed to go?" She didn't look up. "I don't know, Mom. You're resourceful. You'll sort it out." I blinked, letting the silence stretch. "Niles' parents need stability," she added, as if that softened the blow. "They're aging. Clara's got health issues and Dorian's back is bad. They need support." I almost laughed. As if I hadn't been the one clearing snow from the driveway, driving the boys to checkups, cooking from scratch. As if I hadn't held their home together when they were unraveling. "You've had a good stay here," she said, finally facing me. "It's time." Like I'd been on a prolonged holiday I should be thankful for, like I hadn't sacrificed my own life to fit into theirs. I nodded slowly. "Got it." I walked to the living room without another word, and that's when I saw it. The family photo above the fireplace. The one from our Lake Michigan summer, with Eli's arm around me and the boys sticky with ice cream, was gone. In its place was a new frame, shiny and gold, holding a photo of Niles as a boy, standing beside someone I didn't know. It stood out bold and deliberate. I stared longer than I meant to. When I turned, Taryn was already upstairs. That night, while the house hummed with talk of move-in dates and hypoallergenic pillows, I took my tea to the garage and sat on the cold step by the dryer. I pulled out the small journal I'd kept since Eli's death and wrote 2 lines. "This isn't my home anymore, but it's not theirs yet either." I tucked the journal back in my pocket. Then I opened the cabinet above the washer and began a mental tally. I started with the washer and dryer. I'd bought them when the old ones failed during a flu outbreak. Taryn was frantic. Niles was away. I'd gone to the store the next morning and paid in full. The receipt was still in my email, dated 2 years back. I printed it and placed it in a new folder labeled My Assets in pencil. Next was the dining table. I recalled measuring the space with Camille, picking out finishes, ensuring it could expand for holiday meals. That table had held every celebration since Eli's passing, every homework project, every spilled juice cup. I'd paid by check. The copy was still in my desk. The air purifier came during spring when Taryn fretted about the boys' allergies. The pressure cooker was my Christmas gift to myself, unthought of by anyone else that year. I moved through the house slowly, noting things I'd long stopped seeing. The corner lamp in the living room, the hall shelf with spare batteries, the entryway rug I'd bought after a slip on the tiles. Each item held a story, a quiet ledger of contribution. I opened a new file on my laptop and listed them, not just what I'd bought, but when, how much, and why. I cross-referenced bank statements, store accounts, digital receipts. The numbers were consistent, the story undeniable. By the time the boys were asleep and the house dimmed, I had 3 folders of receipts and records. I hid them under my mattress, deep in the corner, and lay awake for hours. Just before midnight, I opened a private tab and reserved a weekend stay at a rental nearby. I used a different surname. Just a trial, I told myself. A practice run, nothing more. I waited until Friday. Taryn had a work event and Niles was set to take the twins to karate, then visit his parents. That gave me 4 hours, clean and clear. I parked a borrowed van a block away and texted Camille, ready. She arrived promptly, sleeves up, eyes sharp. We worked quietly, efficiently. No loud drawers, no scraping furniture, just steady steps and packed bags. We began in the master closet. My blankets, coats, the sewing machine stashed behind an old fan, then the living room. I rolled up the rug I'd bought after nearly falling on the tiles. Camille packed the books. She paused at one with Eli's notes in the margins, handing it to me silently. The kitchen took longest. Every pot, every tool I'd bought, every appliance I'd replaced, it all went. The shelves were left bare, save for a few mismatched cups and a chipped strainer. I took the pressure cooker, especially the pressure cooker. We saved the dining table for last. I cleaned it one final time before dismantling the extensions and wrapping the chairs in old quilts. Camille shook her head as we worked. They'll come home and think the place collapsed. No, I said. They'll see what they created when they pushed me out. By noon, the van was loaded. I did a final sweep, not for nostalgia, but to confirm I'd claimed every trace of my contribution. Then I left a single page on the counter where they'd find it. I'd typed it the previous night, printed it at the library, signed it in blue ink. What I paid for, I took. What you discarded, you can keep. No closing, no name, just facts. Camille and I drove to the rental, a small studio with worn counters and a finicky heater. But the lock turned under my key. The thermostat bent to my touch. The quiet was mine. That night I brewed tea in my own mug in a kitchen that didn't begrudge me and listed what I wouldn't miss. The locksmith came early, a wiry man named Jonah, smelling faintly of coffee and steel. I offered water. He declined and set to work. In 20 minutes the deadbolt was new. He handed me the keys and I held them longer than needed. They felt solid, warm. I signed the lease that afternoon, a simple one-page agreement. No tricks, no fine print, just a rent I could manage without touching my pension. I set up auto-pay from a savings account Taryn didn't know about. I'd started it after Eli's death, tucking away small sums. Back then I didn't know why, now I did. That evening, as I unpacked plates in my kitchenette, someone knocked. I braced for demands, but it was a woman with a kind smile and a tin of biscuits. "I'm Leota," she said. "Unit 3B. Saw you move in. We play cards Thursdays in the rec room. Join us." I nodded, surprised by how easily I agreed. An hour later, I sat at a folding table with Leota and 3 others, widows, 1 divorced, all retired, laughing over bad hands and weak coffee. No one asked me to tidy up. No one spoke over me. No one expected more than my company. I walked back to my place with a lightness in my chest, like a weight had lifted. I made eggs on my small stove, ate on the futon, and savored the glow of a lamp I'd picked myself. The old house lingered in my thoughts, but its hold was fading. I slept with the door locked, windows slightly open, keys under my pillow. Not from fear, but habit. A habit I was ready to shed. The first call came at 9:13 a.m. I let it ring. I knew that tone, sharp, irritated. She left no message. The second call came 20 minutes later. This time a voicemail. "Hey, Mom, did you maybe take more than you meant to? The fridge is empty. Did you take all the pans, too?" By noon, she'd called 5 times. The sixth at 1:04 p.m. came with a message that started tense and unraveled. "The boys are upset because their cereal's gone and the stove's acting up. Niles is tinkering, but it's not right. Where's the pressure cooker? Did you take the washer?" Yes, I had. I was at my fold-out table, sipping tea from a cup I didn't share when voicemail 8 arrived. "Mom, this is a lot. We didn't expect everything to vanish. Can you at least bring back some stuff for the kids? Who takes the air purifier?" Someone who paid for it, I thought. By the 10th call, her tone softened, fraying at the edges. "Look, maybe I didn't phrase things right. I was overwhelmed. Niles' parents aren't even helping yet, just causing stress. I didn't mean to make you feel unwanted." It wasn't about feelings. It was about what I'd finally seen clearly. The 11th call came after dark. Her voice was weary, rough. "Mom, please, I didn't mean it like that. Come back. The boys keep asking for you. I didn't think you'd actually go." I watched the phone dim on the 12th call and silenced the ringer. That night I stood at my window, looking at the quiet street below, untouched by the chaos unfolding across town. I wasn't needed until I was missed. There's a distinction. I rinsed my cup, dried it with my own towel, and set it on a shelf I'd hung myself. The lawyer's office was calm, nestled between a tailor and a florist downtown. Miss Halloran, quiet but straightforward, reviewed my notes and receipts without comment. She nodded as she scanned the folder. I'd brought bank records, appliance invoices, even a grocery log I'd kept on a whim. "No formal lease," she said, "but clear evidence. You'd qualify as a contributing tenant with legal protections. If you want compensation, we can file a claim, or you can walk away, your call." I nodded, already certain. I didn't want their money. I wanted the respect they'd overlooked. That night I wrote the letter. I didn't overthink it. Taryn, I wasn't just staying there. I was investing, my time, my funds, my care. You treated me like help when it suited you and a burden when it didn't. I didn't leave because I was wounded. I left because I remembered my worth. You've lost a caretaker, a cook, a sitter. But more, you've lost your mother. That cost won't show in your banking app, but it will in your home. Marley's. I folded it, sealed it, and mailed it the next morning. No return address. By the time I returned, Leota had left a pie on my doorstep with a note. "See you Thursday. Bring your spark." I smiled, unlocked my door, and stepped into my space. Camille arrived with boxed wine, 2 plastic cups, and a bag of crackers and cheese. She surveyed my studio and nodded. "It's snug," she said, kicking off her shoes. "And it doesn't smell like anyone's been shouting in it." We sat on the futon, toasting like young friends, laughing until we gasped. For the first time in years, no one needed me to hurry. No one corrected my thermostat or my folding habits. Just 2 women who'd known each other long enough to laugh freely. The next day, Leota brought a hand-stitched potholder, purple with gold trim. "Housewarming," she said, "made it when my hands were steadier." I thanked her and hung it by the oven. It felt right, like something earned. Days later, a thick envelope arrived. Inside was a crayon drawing on a paper plate, showing a small house with a wobbly chimney and stick figures, me and 2 boys. At the top, in shaky letters, Grandma's home. I held it close for a moment before pinning it to the fridge. I no longer had a grand dining room, a master suite, or a hall of family photos, but I had peace. And this time I wasn't just in the house. I owned the peace within it.